This section is dedicated to the topic of ITIL practices, but because there are 15 practices in total that we have to discuss, I have divided this discussion in 3 different parts, and we will start with part 1. Actually, in the beginning, we are going to do a small recap about what exactly is an ITIL practice, why do we need to have practices, and I will also give you an overview of the 15 practices that you need to know for the foundation exam. Let's start with a definition, which, by the way, we have already discussed about the definition. The definition is a set of organizational resources which are used to perform repetitive tasks and achieve objectives. Basically, whenever you have to deal with a repetitive activity, if you want to have consistency and if you want to be able to measure performance and increase the quality, it is a very good idea to define a practice. Otherwise, if you don't define a practice, if you don't have a process for executing that type of activity, there is a very high probability that you will achieve a different output every time you are running the activity. So it's very difficult to achieve consistency, and that will also compromise the performance. It may compromise the quality of the output. So the more complex the organization, the more complex the activities, the more important it becomes to define practices for it. And the good news is that ITIL provides a total of 34 practices. So it can help us with different type of repetitive tasks that we are usually faced with as service providers. So it provides this operating model that we can use as a starting point. Why am I saying as a starting point? Because the practices as they are defined in ITIL, they are a great starting point, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they will be perfect for your organization. So it's actually a work in progress. It's a continual improvement here, because even if you start with the way the practices are recommended by ITIL, that's probably not going to be sufficient in the long term. So you will have to keep improving and adapting your practices. Another good news is that for the foundation exam, you don't need to know about all the 34 practices which are contained in ITIL. You only have to know about 15 of them. Here, I'm going to show you which are the 15 practices that you need to know for the foundation exam. On the left side, we have 7 of them, which you have to know in more specific detail. So you will see that the videos that I have prepared for these practices are more detailed. We will have a more thorough discussion about them. I will give you more examples, not just the purpose and the basic definitions, because there will be more questions in the foundation exam regarding those 7 practices. And these are service level management, change control, continual improvement, the service desk, incident, problem, and request management. On the right side, you have 8 practices for which you only have to remember the purpose in the exam. So that's another good news. The problem is you really have to know the purpose, each one of them, because there has to be no confusion in the exam. They will probably test to see if you understood the difference, for example, between release management and deployment management, and you really need to make sure that you remember the purpose for these practices. So in the next videos, we will start discussing about each of the practices, and I will begin with the ones on the left, with the ones that you need to know in more detail.